This is my third bout with seminary. And yes, I do mean bout because it's been a struggle, it's been a fight. You might be saying to yourself, Paul, why would you put yourself through that? Well, the truth is, that wasn't my plan from the beginning. In 2003, I graduated from Ball State University. I moved out to Denver. I was all set, ready to go to Denver Seminary. I had it all planned out. I was going to go to school for 3 years. I was going to move back to Detroit. I was going to start a church for left out people I felt like the local church was not reaching out to, and everything would be perfect. It would all run smoothly. I would have success, and people would come to Christ like they had never did before. Well, the truth is, that's not quite how it worked out. As I said, this is my third time at seminary. While I was here the first time, I decided to volunteer at a ministry in the inner city here that reached out to a lot of the same people that I felt like I was called to. And while I was there, I realized that they were dealing with a lot of issues that I had never dealt with. There was homelessness, teen pregnancy, abuse in their family, drug addiction, things that I had never really experienced. I had loving parents, a great family. I was from the suburbs. We never needed anything. We never wanted for anything. And so I thought, well, I may never be able to sympathize with these people. I may never have something that will speak into their lives that I can be like, you know what, you can make it, you can get through this. However, my second year in school, I got a lifetime of tragedy all in a few months. I was fired from my first ever paid ministry job. I was a youth pastor. I was fired. I was told that the youth were not on fire for Christ. A few months later, my dad was in an ATV accident. He was permanently disabled. And a few months after that, my oldest brother, died in a car accident. So I wasn't expecting this tragedy. Before this, the only tragedy that I had ever experienced is I had shoulder injuries that made it hard for me to swim. I thought I was one day going to be an Olympic swimmer, but it never came about because I developed these shoulder injuries in high school. And the thing is that's not really that big of a deal. And the truth is I was never really going to be an Olympic athlete. I just thought I was going to. So now that all this tragedy had struck, I did not handle it well. I went into a deep depression. The grades tanked at school. I didn't know what to do. So I quit school, moved back to Michigan. I was supposed to have a wonderful life. I thought everything was going to work out perfectly. While I was in seminary, I met my wife, who would become my wife. We were newly married, and everything was supposed to be perfect. But it wasn't. I went into a deep depression. I ran away from God. I was like Jonah. I tried to get as far away from him as I could. And then I called back when I read the book of James. Now, before this, I had probably only read James once. That was during my 8th grade catechism, and that's because Martin Luther said he didn't like it. So I'm like, well, I better check this thing out. And so I want to give a little bit of background on the book of James. This is unique because this is a one-off sermon. I wouldn't usually do this, but since Pastor Eric just announced in the newsletter that we were going to start a new series on Philippians, I thought you were a little confused. Like, why is Paul talking about James? Well, this is for my class. This is for my preaching class. So bear with me. We're going to dive in here a little bit into James and some basic information. So James was written by James, probably the brother of Jesus. There's some different James in the Bible, and he's the most likely candidate. He starts it out with, I am writing to the 12 tribes scattered among the nations. So he's probably writing to other Jews. He was probably writing to Jews who became Christians. And then the way it's written is there's different sayings, some short explanations of practical issues. It's a lot like reading Psalms or Proverbs, more so Proverbs. There's different themes such as suffering, wisdom, sin. So James is kind of all over the place. We're going to look at one section that back some years ago really stood out to me and changed my perspective on my plans for the future. So we're going to look at James 4:13 through 18. So I'm going to read from the NIV. Open up your Bibles, read along with me. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then it vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil. Anyone, then, who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, sins. So here, James, he's writing to a people, probably Jewish Christians. A few verses before this, he addresses the brothers and sisters of the faith. And so it's a little bit vague. We're not exactly sure who he's talking about, but we know it's other Christians, probably Jews. But there's not context like there is with the book of Romans, like I did a few sermons ago. But this quote here is telling, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. So this is kind of a unique thing. Most people stayed in their hometown their whole life, and they made money there. They did stuff, they learned a craft, they became farmers. They were general laborers. But there was a special class of traveling salesmen that would go from city to city, they'd buy things and sell them. Now, back then, they were a little leery of traveling salesmen, kind of like we are today of salesmen. It's hard, we inherently don't want to trust them because they don't make anything. A farmer grows stuff that we can buy, a craftsman makes stuff that we can buy, but salesmen, they make money off of convenience. So there's times where we think, well, we don't really trust these people. And a lot of times they weren't trusted back then. They weren't allowed to be on different city councils and all that. So he is telling these probably traveling salesmen, you are going about this the wrong way. Instead of asking, how much money can we make? You should be asking, if it is the Lord's will that we live, then we will do this or that. So he goes on to say that there's boasting, okay? That you should not be boasting. That boasting is actually evil. He could have said that it's a sin. He could have said that it's foolish, but he said it's evil. And the reason why it's evil is because they're building one sin on top of another. They've already said that we can predict the future, okay? And we boast in our ability to predict the future. But he goes on to say that your life is a mist. There's nothing. You're here such a short amount of time. You're chasing after the wrong things. Instead, ask what is God's will. So this reminds me a little bit of Luke 12, where Jesus says that he shares a parable about a rich farmer. Well, he became rich because he had a great harvest one year. Instead of sharing his extra food, his extra grain, he decided to tear down his barns and build up bigger ones, not knowing that night he was going to die. And Jesus says that's foolish. It's dumb. You should be sharing your wealth. And James is saying the same thing here to these people. You are rich. not because of what you've done. Barack Obama reminds us, you didn't do that. Instead, you are rich because God has blessed you. All right? God gives people wealth. Not like the health and wealth guys say that if you have this special faith, you will become rich. No. God determines who is wealthy and who is not. He gives wealth to people who he wants to give wealth to. And if you are wealthy, you have a responsibility. If you are Christian and you are wealthy, you have a responsibility to share that wealth. And that's what James is saying here. He's saying, you know the good that you ought to do, and you don't do it. That is a sin. Boasting is evil, okay? We can't predict the future. We have not earned these things on our own. We instead have been blessed by God by the wealth that we have. Now, might be thinking, all right, what does this have to do with us today? What does this have to do with our church today? How is this message applicable? Well, there's a group here who have been asked, so what is the rest of your future like? What is your plan? How do you expect this life to be for you? You have to have it all figured out. That group is our youth group. Whether people mean to, on purpose or not, it is implied that they have to know what their life is going to be. So our youth group is a part of Generation Z. They were born between 1997 and 2012. I call them Zoomers, okay? There's a lot of positives about Zoomers. They're self-sufficient, they're independent, they're digital natives, so they understand how to use technology. Unfortunately, my camera is not very good. It just cut out, so I just started it again. They probably would have figured out some way to fix that. But they also have some negatives. Two big ones that they have to face that in greater amounts than any other generation is anxiety and depression. Their anxiety and depression are huge in this generation. And I believe a big reason why is because of this pressure that has been put on them to have their future planned out. They have to predict what's going to happen. And lately, they've had to struggle with it because a lot of their plans have been put on hold with this pandemic. A lot of the pressure they get is from teachers, school counselors, but most of it is from parents. Parents have decided this is what I want my kid to be, what I want them to do. And the parents have taken that childhood and said, you have to do these things. Parents have, if a kid doesn't step up and do what they want them to do, parents do it for them. Parents have been known to write college essays for their applications. Parents have faked recommendation letters. Parents have stepped in and taken the SAT or ACT for their kid. There's even a story of parents who paid college sports coaches for a scholarship, a roster spot, so that their kid can go to this prestigious school. A lot of these parents could have afforded paying for their kid to go to school. The kids are probably academically able, but they weren't athletically able. And sometimes they didn't even play the sport that they were chosen to be on. There's an element of prestige, of honor, something that elevated you to success if you had this. Now, success is defined by this group as, this is the message that kids get from their parents. You must be successful, and this is how you are successful. Study, study, study. Study so that you get good grades. Get good grades so that you get into a good school. A good school is an Ivy League or something that someone has heard of. And then, once you are in a good school, then you will get a good job. And a good job is, well, you can be a doctor or you can be a doctor. And then you will have success because you will be rich and you'll be healthy. And that's what it's all about. Now, I've got to have a quick aside to my classmates. My church is a mixed culture. We have a large group of retired Anglo-Americans, as well as a large group of first-generation Chinese immigrants. And then my youth group is mostly Chinese American students. So this next illustration, you might think, where did this come from? This is very specific. Well, yes, because it applies to my church. And I think it might be good for you to hear anyway. There's a comedian, his name is Ronnie Chang, and he talks about why Chinese parents want their kids to become doctors. And he says that, helping people, if it is even on the list of reasons to become a doctor, it's way down at the bottom. It's an unfortunate byproduct of becoming a doctor. Instead, to become a doctor, it takes a group of people who come here with nothing, usually, they're immigrants. It helps them earn honor. It helps them earn prestige and credibility, all in one generation if their kid becomes a doctor. And he tells a joke about why his mother wants him to become a doctor. He says that his mother, he could never convince his mother to go to the doctor. She could be impaled with an arrow and still not go to the doctor. And he'll say, Mom, go to the doctor. You need to go to the doctor. And she'll say, no, I won't go to the doctor. All he's going to do is take my money. And he says, then why do you want me to become a doctor? And he says, so you can take other people's money. So the definition of success, its definition of a happy, healthy life is money. It's about this success. Now, being a doctor is a good thing. You can help people. You can heal people. If you have the right motivations, it's a good thing. But that's not the motivation pushing a lot of parents of why they want their kids to be successful. Now, this is not just true of Chinese people. You may hear this story and think, oh yeah, that's my mom, that's my grandma, that's me. I'm driven for this success. But it's not just a Chinese thing. I see parents in everything I do pushing their kids to be successful. I'm a coach. I coach football. I coach track and field. I see parents of every race pushing their kids to be successful. It may not be academic, may be athletics related, but we have this idea that success can be guaranteed if we work hard. And success is defined by these material goods, by money. But what's the problem with this idea of success? Even if it's something to become a doctor, which could be a good thing. Well, the problem is that it never asks, is this God's will? Maybe it isn't God's will that your children become doctors. Maybe it isn't God's will that you have a big house. Maybe it's not God's will that you drive a brand new car. Instead, it could be, like James is saying here, it is God's will, he's implying that it's God's will to share those things. Do the good things that you know that are good. Later verses he explains that wealth has an expiration date. It becomes a poison, becomes rotten. If you are hoarding onto it, if you're holding onto it, it will destroy you. Now, this idea of success is a corruption. Success should not be defined by how much money I make, how big of a house I have, how brand new is my car. Instead, the success that we should be defining for our young people is how to be obedient. Are you following Christ? Are you a disciple? Are you starting with, is this God's will? And so, with our hubris, our belief that we can predict the future, it has all been thrown out the window for our young people. Like I said, this pandemic has affected them. I'm counseling a young woman right now who's in college who she had everything planned out, or I should say her parents had everything planned out. She's going to go to school, she's going to do an internship, she was going to get a job in her chosen field to get some experience. She's going to go back to graduate school, and then when she graduated, she's going to have the experience and the education to get a better job in that same field. But this pandemic has put everything on hold. She is questioning completely whether any of this is worth it. And she's starting to ask, what is God's will? And other people are dealing with this. They're worried about what might happen, about how is this going to work out? But what we need to remember is that God is sovereign. We have to start with, is this God's will? If it is, then we can do this and we can do that. God must come first. He is in control. He is going to get whatever he wants. And we can either go along with him in that journey, or we can be pulled, dragged, pulled, screaming, and crying the whole way. So I want to move back to my story about when I read this and how it changed my perspective. Fortunately, God pulled me out of that depression. He got me back into school. I did not deserve to be there academically, and I eventually graduated in 2013 with an MA in Christian Studies. I immediately got a job here at Hillcrest as a youth and children's pastor, and to be honest, it should not have worked out. I mean, look at me. I'm a chubby white guy in his 30s who loves sports and punk rock music. The kids in my youth group are very different. They are children of immigrants. They have a stronger sense of obedience, of honoring their parents. They are into things like K-pop and boba and video games I've never heard of. And it shouldn't have worked. They're into ballet, they're into hip-hop dance. It should not have worked, but only because of the Holy Spirit can we say that this ministry has been a success. So, and the reason why I say it's a success is because these kids are so much better than I am. They have overachieved. I am so proud of seeing who they have become and what they have done. And I haven't done anything. None of this is because of me. It's all because of the grace and blessings that God has given. God was going to do a great thing in this church. He was going to have a successful ministry here. He was going to have kids who were devoted to him, and he was going to use me or he wasn't. And so I'm thankful to be a part of that. I'm thankful to this church and to my family. Like I said, this is 7 years later after I graduated. I'm now in seminary for a third time, this time to take a few of the last classes to get my master's in divinity. This will allow me to become ordained and to have a little more job security and be able to help raise my daughter, to give her an opportunity for, not worrying so much about, well, Dad's just a youth pastor, and, he's only working part-time. I'm being obedient to finish what God has given me, what he called me to do almost 20 years ago. So, with that being said, there are a few saints I want to point out in our church. A few people who, through this pandemic, have shown amazing faith. People who have shared their wealth. People who have said, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. First, I want to highlight Marv. Okay, Marv has been here just this week. He was fixing the swamp cooler. I'm the only one who's here, so I'm the only one really benefiting from it. Marv should probably be self-quarantined, but he's out. He's working. He is helping people. He is serving people. He is using his wealth, all right, his abilities, his gifts, his talents to help others. I also want to talk about Long. Long had some extra money. He bought hundreds of face masks and hand sanitizer. He distributed them for free to people in our church and outside of our church, and donated over 200 to the Adventist hospital. That's, Long could have just, taken that money, bought a brand new motorcycle, given me his old one, we'd go on rides together. But that wasn't doing the right thing. Okay? Like James says, you know what the good thing is. Good thing to do is you ought to do it. Long did it. Other people have stepped up. David, he has been putting together all of these services. He's worked a lot on our website, and he's doing it because he's being obedient. He is asking, what is God's will? And I also want to highlight Young, who has been filming a lot of the parts of our services. Not this one, unfortunately. He couldn't make it, but he has spent a lot of time editing and doing those things. I could go on and on of all of the things that our little church has done in these last couple of months to share our wealth, to ask what is the Lord's will, to define success as obedience, being a disciple of Christ. So we are on a journey, like I said. We are on a journey that God has taken us on, that He's doing things in this world. And we can either be obedient and ask, what is your will? Where do you want me to go? Or we can be like, okay, God, you do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to make a whole lot of money. I'm going to keep it all to myself. And I'm going to forget about everybody else. He's going to pull us dragging and screaming. He's going to make us, he's going to get his way. That's just how it is. So I have a couple of messages for different people who might be watching this. For our older generation, please continue to share your wisdom, share your wealth with our church. We are fully indebted to you. Parents, I want you to ask, is this God's will for your children? What does God want for them? How do we need to redefine success? Are you pushing your kid because of this worldly success, or are you pushing them because you want them to be obedient to Christ? For our youth, I want the message that you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have your whole future planned. You are fine with not knowing the future, because nobody does. Instead, what I want you to do is ask God, what is your will for me? How can I be obedient in this moment? Finally, for my classmates, I just want to tell you that, ministry is not going to be what you think it is. It's not going to work out the way you want it to. And that's a good thing, because your idea of success is probably about this big. God's idea is this big. So start every morning like I do with a prayer. Lord, if it is your will, we should live. And then we can do this or that. God bless.